Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your particular challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. And my guest today is well known to many of our listeners out there, but just to give you a little clue and a hint, he's an active listening coach, he's also a tour guide, and he's also a mentor. I'm delighted to welcome back to the show, Don Harris. Hi, Don.
Good afternoon, Alec. Lovely to hear from you and see you and chat.
And chat again. Well,
Yeah.
we could keep this going all day, but we're busy. We're busy people. So listen, give the listeners a quick rundown on you leaving school. Were you the academic? You want to get into the workforce, or what was on your mind when you were leaving school?
It's a very good question. I think at the time I was leaving, like so many, probably then and even now, I didn't really know what the plan was, what I was to do. I went to Sutton Park School in Howth. I'm still living in Howth, so I didn't go too far from the tree.
Right.
The only, what I would call career guidance at that stage was pretty limited. Even that they did have a guidance counselor was good, I suppose. But my personality apparently led them to think I'd be good at sales. You'd be good at sales, Don. Oh, that's very handy to know. But I didn't really, that's much more than that. And looking back on it, I'm a little bit surprised. There was no kind of educational trips to places where you might think, oh, I like that, or, that's a nice environment or whatever. So within 3 weeks of school ending, which was, in my case, 1973, I was in Switzer's department store as a sales assistant. And there I was for a couple of years. So sales was the thing. And I said, okay, I'll give it a go.
Well, you couldn't have started in a better place. A lot of our listeners wouldn't be familiar with Switzer's, but Brown Thomas is the sort of equivalent of it today. Would that be fair to say?
And in the same premises, because Switzer's was where Brown Thomas were, and Brown Thomas where Marks and Spencer's are, I think I'm right in saying. Anyway, they moved across the road, and yes. Switzer's took the same premises. So yeah, very happy years there, but I still was not quite sure. And I think, as might also happen, I kind of felt maybe I should be doing more, and I went back and did some more leaving certificate subjects to kind of give me a better leaving. I had passed my leaving, but a better leaving. So I got a few honours and things, one of which was geography. So I think that possibly was a clue to my interest in travel and people and things like that as time went on.
Where it was going to take you for the future. Just before we kind of say goodbye to Switzer's, I'm just wondering, what sort of mentorship did you get there? I mean, I presume they just didn't throw you in and leave you to your own devices.
Yeah, well, I was a trainee manager, but honestly, I don't really remember sitting in a training room or anything like that. I think you were just taken in as a junior, and the buyers, and that was a kind of head of the department, gave you the direction on the floor, and you kind of learnt as you went. And I think that was about the extent of the training that you got. I think they assessed you probably in day one, even at your interview, as to whether you could find your way or would you be suitable. And I suppose I was an outgoing personality kind of person, and so they said, "Okay, we'll give it a go." I mean, what's the worst that can happen? They probably let you go again, But it was interesting times, and I loved it. I did love it.
You talked about geography as a sort of inspirational, sort of really something that got you going. Tell us a bit about that.
I just discovered I had a flair for geography. I was good at drawing maps and all the things that you need in geography. Of course, I didn't know really what I was doing, except I was interested in it. I was looking at globes, and I remember doing a great essay in my exam on because you had to do things like on the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert. Can you believe that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just was fascinated. I have a book still about them, and this kind of grabbed me. So people in faraway places, pictures, and this was pretty early on. So we weren't getting a lot of, let's say, world tours by Billy Connolly or the great Michael, whose surname I never forget, but the great tours he did of all around the world on television. But I had an interest, certainly, and then I got my honours in English as well, and so I was able to write. I was able to get an idea of where countries were, and I had an interest. The next thing was, would I get to see them all? That still hasn't happened.
Right. So to progress your career, okay, you've gone back, you've got some additional honors. What are you going to do with those, or what's going to put food on the table, as they say?
Yeah, well, of course, food on the table at the age of 18 wasn't really a big thing. It was at home. You just came home. But from the point of view of a career and, starting going out with somebody, I did quite early on, and found myself married at the age of 24. So then food on the table became important. And then my career had to move on. And I found myself moving into advertising. And
Right.
then oddly, as the 70s went on, well, let me explain about moving into advertising. I was interested in advertising as well. My parents always said, "You're more interested in the commercials on the television than the actual programs." So I I found myself, yeah, maybe I am. So I did go and study advertising and marketing at night, in what was the College of Commerce in Rathmines. And so that did become an interest. So I found myself getting a job in advertising. Um, you might say in advertising sales in a
Right.
way, because I did sell advertising in magazines and things, but I also worked in ad agencies, small ones, and found my way through the whole thing of handling advertising accounts, small ones, but
Sure.
nevertheless, that led me into dealing with people, which I already had some skill at because of my time in Switzerland, where you had to listen very carefully to the clients. And the little bit of training I do remember getting was very clear. Do not say, do not say to the customer who might be browsing, "Are you all right?"
Right.
Because all they're going to say is, "Yes, thanks." Then you're gone.
It's a closed conversation.
Yeah. And then if you put that in the context of today, you just say, you see people behind the till, they don't even look up and say, "You all right?"
No.
And you kind of say, "Well, no, I'm actually, that's why I'm here." But so the training was, is there anything I can help you with? That was the training. That was the key statement. Is there anything I can help you with? And that led you on to all kinds of different conversations then. And then you knew where you were. But I thought it was a very good bit of small training, if you like.
Sure.
And obvious now, you might think, but maybe it's not that obvious because it's not happened that much.
Right. And this was going to lead you on. So you spent some time there. The advertising. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you spent quite a few of your years in advertising.
Yes, I shortly after that, what happened was I found myself very interested in radio. So I drifted into pirate radio as a DJ, through a very good friend of mine, PJ, who now lives in France, and he was doing a program on a radio station on the south side of Dublin, on Rochestown Avenue, in the Hotel Victor, as was a little pirate station operated from there, in what I seem to recall was a bicycle shed or very similar anyway.
Right.
And Peter said to me, "Oh, I'm going to go on holidays, John. Would you like to do the program for a couple of weeks?" And I said, "I'd love to have a go at that, Peter." So in those days, you brought along your own albums. By the way, there were no CDs in those days.
No, no.
And you played your own records and you made it up as you went along. And I just found I really enjoyed it. So then I found myself in another station and another station and another station, and so it went on. So advertising went hand in hand with pirate radio. And then real radio, of course, came along a lot later. When I say real radio, I mean independent radio was launched with the Broadcasting Act in
Legitimate radio.
1988. Legitimate radio, the like of what you are doing now. So that was so I got interested, and the link between sales, advertising, and radio became stronger with me. I did a period, by the way, with the RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution here, RNLI Ireland, as they're known, and I was the deputy national organizer for them. Sold advertising in their annual magazine to make that work, and that was a lovely period where I was traveling around the country, seeing lifeboat stations and lifeboat people. One of my favorite jobs. I just got married. We're on to 1979 now. And it was a lovely job, but the pay wasn't tremendous. And had it been slightly different, I could well have stayed.
You could well have stayed there. Very good.
But it got to grow, and it kind of formed something in my mind that maybe there's a way of selling advertising for radio, even though it was still illegitimate, if you like, radio, but not real, not licensed. And so I did set up a company later on then.
All right. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Don Harris. And we're just talking about Don being the pirate, well, the pirate radio station host, and also selling advertising. But this was going to lead on. I mean, really what we're talking about is your sort of expertise in communications, and the fact that you can sell, the fact that you can meet and greet people, the fact that you're on radio and keep a show going. So it shows you're a skilled communicator.
Yeah, I think there were beginnings of that. Not that I would have had any inkling that that's what I was, but my personality lent me to be able to conduct myself in public, to be able to listen to people and respect them and to speak. So I learned. I also studied public relations, as it happens. These are all things that kind of linked. So
Sure.
going back to your earlier question, though, really, you could say I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just was trying things, and if they didn't work out, I tried something else. So I did go through a number of jobs at that time before I settled down into, in my 30s, really, into what was the thing that was going to be the life which became the selling of local radio advertising and the setting up of a company called Airtime Limited, and being the first CEO of an organization called IRS, and that was Independent Radio Sales in 1992. So that's fast forward a lot, but
Yes, of
during
course.
the 80s, it was lifeboats, it was marketing, and it was selling prior to the 1988 Act, advertising for local radio stations. But also then, I found myself selling ad space in magazines for two prominent magazines. One was IMJ at the time, and then I moved to Business and Finance magazine in the
Oh, very
Bellenos
good.
organization in Fitzwilliam Square.
Right.
And that was kind of leading up to the launch then of Airtime and the central sales organization that I eventually set up.
I mean, really what you're doing, we're sowing the seeds, because we're going to start bringing you forward, because I mean, you've done a lot in your career. You've hosted You and Your Business, and you did that for 10 years very successfully. Um, so, I mean, you've obviously, you still can't get away from radio. The fact that I've got you back on it again.
Well, I clearly am a good character, spotting good characters and putting them in and asking them would they like to take on a mantle, Alec. That's, I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, I must say you can get the bug very easily, because I suppose you and I have a lot of similarities apart from age and getting married young and all those things.
Loss of hair. Yeah, I know also.
But it's also meeting people and new people, finding people interesting. So let's move forward. Let's talk about what you're doing more recently, and bring people up to date on what's happening.
Yeah, well, so through the 90s, I was very happily doing the radio sales. But what I discovered was, and I think this may happen to a number of people, when you're running an organization and it's all about figures and targets, meetings about meetings, you find yourself more detached from radio, more just running the business. And that didn't suit me. I really like to be involved. So things came to an end in 1997, a natural end, I might say, because things moved on, and that company IRS is in a great place now and has done great work ever since. But I kept Airtime Limited, kept doing promotions. But around about that time, digital was coming along, and I was thinking, I don't really know much about digital. How do I, get into this? So I launched Talkback, which is a feedback organization, and I found myself doing a lot of interviews with people and getting good feedback about what's going on in their organization. So I would have at that stage done some work for Samaritans, which is one of the clients, and finding out what the people who work for Samaritans at the end of the telephones do, and why they are helping out in the way they are. And they were such great people, and Samaritans as an organization was such great organization. So I really discovered the value of that. There's the value of feedback, which I discovered the Breakfast of Champions, it's called. So that kind of became the theme then. So that's when I trained to be a coach, a life coach.
Sure.
I then went further down the road, and that trains you very well to be a listener, a good listener. So the active listening coach came into being in the last few years. But Talkback did a lot of feedback with a lot of companies, banks and aviation companies. And so that led me into doing a 7-year contract with a large organization DHL Air, and I did a lot of work with them in Germany and the UK in these feedback interviews, and finding out what pilots and engineers had to say about the work that they're doing. And they're very good people, but they have sometimes not as much a need to be in touch with the organization that they're working for as the organization might feel they should have, because they're flying the aircraft very safely. They do everything that's required, but that's the job, and maybe the connection between the organization themselves can sometimes be a bit loose. So we set up a program. We got engagement with that body of people and the engineers from 47% to 74% in the period that I was doing it. So it was really very enjoyable work and very valuable work. And that then led on to other things. I had a bit of a medical upheaval way back in 2014, so 9 years ago, which set me back a few months, but that all was overcome very well. And so I continued on. But I suppose there was a grow on me about the life coaching, and that took over a bit as well. So I've coached a lot of people, and mentoring became part of the idea then. And much later, other things which we'll probably talk about to where we are now. But that it was all leading up to where I am now. And I suppose what I'd like to say is to people who may be considering their future now and maybe listening to this, even though you think it's going to be one thing when you're leaving school and maybe you're in holidays or even in university, what you are doing now or even thinking of doing now may not be the thing that turns out to be your life further on.
Right. I know. I think that's a very, very good piece of advice. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Don Harris. And Don, you were just talking about something very, very important, and I think people overlook it in business. And you have that skill set, and you've brought it through a number of your different careers, and that is the power of listening as opposed to talking.
Correct.
And I'd like
pausing. That's why I did that, because
I'm getting lessons as well. There we go, all thrown in.
Because what the thing about listening is that very thing. There's an anagram, which is that the letters in the word listen and the letters in the word silent are exactly the same.
Very good.
So you need to pause before you jump in with your reply to people sometimes, to give a chance to what they have said to resonate with you, and perhaps what you've said to resonate with them, and not be always thinking of your reply immediately, because it takes a moment or two actually, and there's no harm in pausing. It doesn't work on radio if it's, a minute, but we could live with 10 seconds or something like that. But the pause is powerful. And you need to give the impression, and not just the impression, but actuality to it, as making the other person feel the most important in the room, or that they are right in front of you, and not be distracted by anything else, which I probably will bring us on to something else like networking, and something that you would have done an awful lot too, and the difficulties around that, and how listening is so important in that. So thank you for raising it. I think it's really, really important, both for young people, mental health, and all kinds of reasons.
No, I'd agree with you wholeheartedly. And there's nothing more frustrating than when you're trying to make a point of relevance, to see the person quite clearly not listening, but trying to open their mouth because they want to say something. And as I say to people, you learn nothing from talking. Yeah,
it's a fair way of putting it. And just in a networking context, you can be in a room talking with somebody, and they're looking over their shoulder. They're looking all around the place at who their next victim is. And they're already tired of the conversation. And you know that. And yes, you can see it. And the other thing that really irks me is when you're deep in conversation. So you and I are deep in conversation now. We're having a great chat, and there's nothing nobody's interfering with us. And the next thing, out of the blue, somebody comes along and says, "Alec, I've been wanting to get a word with you. You don't mind, do you?" So I have now got to the point that I actually say, "No, I don't mind at all, as long as you wait till we finish our conversation, if that's okay with you."
Yes.
And mostly they're okay about it, but it's that thing of, why is your conversation more important than ours, that I think is important to get over to people, that they understand that there may feels special. I think if you give people your undivided attention when you were with them, you make them feel special, and so they should be.
Well, Dale Carnegie put it very well when he said people are most interested in those who are most interested in them.
Exactly. Yes. Couldn't have put it better, obviously, as a Mr. Carnegie. So yeah, I think that's the thing. So that led into other things as time went on, and the pandemic came along. But prior to that, I'd been talking to a good friend of mine who has been a tour guide for many years, and he often said to me, "You'd be a great tour guide. Why don't you think about it?" And I did think about it, and it got a bit more serious then. I got a chance, actually prior to the pandemic. It wasn't particularly linked to the pandemic. It was more that we were moving house, and I was living with my daughter and son-in-law for a couple of years, 13 months. I shouldn't say a couple of years, but it was a question of what can I do?
Yes.
It's not that easy to work from here. Trained to be a tour guide, trained then to be a driver of a coach as well, to get
Right.
what they call a D1 license, to allow you to bring people around the country. So now I am a tour guide and driver, as well as other things. And strangely enough, but maybe not so, because we have time, some coaching conversations come into some of the conversations I'm having with clients, in the most magnificent places. I can remember one on the cliffs of Moher last year with a gentleman, which turned into quite a life-changing conversation, as it turned out. Not for me, but for him, as it turned out.
But
And we had a wonderful trip. So yeah, all these things linked together.
But it's interesting when we start putting together the component parts and we go back to you leaving school and you're interested in geography, you're interested in communications, your ability to listen and be interested in other people, and which is kind of like a sales tool as well. But I'm not saying you're selling something to them. And when you combine all of those skills, you've got the perfect repertoire to be a tour guide.
Yeah, well, it turned out I am quite good at it, and that's a surprise to me. But how do you know that? You only know it, I think, by people giving you notes and giving you compliments. And but after the fact, when you get to the end of the tour,
Sure.
I'm always blessed and humbled to get lovely notes from people saying you made such a difference to our vacation, or thank you so much time for your time, or little things that at the end of the day mean a lot to me, that I have added, and to use that phrase, mattered during the tour to these people. And you really do find some good friends, and that's still the case. So yeah, it's very fulfilling. It's very fulfilling to do it. And along that, the life coaching I do and the mentoring with some people along the way mixes in with it. So it's a mix. I know there's one other thing you're going to ask me about. Well, I know we'll get to that.
No, I'm just going to talk to you about
Yeah.
engaging people, and one of the key skills there, and it comes from the listening skill as well, is being able to read people. I mean, I'm sure on certain parts of any sort of tour, you can read the audience who are saying, please don't talk too much. We want to fall asleep for 20 minutes or half an hour. And then there's other areas that you enliven them again. So it's about reading people.
It's a very good point. And yes, certainly as a tour guide and driver, you're very conscious when people want to be quiet, and you're watching for that. And you let them do that for half an hour, 45 minutes, or however long it suits them. It's absolutely correct.
Yeah,
And
so
it's very important, and it gives you a break, but you don't want to be talking all the time. That's not the idea. In fact, I do sum up notes so that I'm not talking. I just hand out notes of places we're going to, like the Rock of Cashel or the Cliffs or the Burren or Ring of Kerry and things. So people have some idea of the information, and they can take it in, and then they just see it. And yeah, so it works very well. Yeah, quite right.
you see, one of the real skills in terms of modern working is the ability to find something that you particularly like, i.e. geography, blend it into something else you like, people, and then blend the two and get paid for it.
Completely. And that's what I've fallen into. And I say that honestly, because who would have known? I knew I'd always had an interest in travel, but I was thinking of further away, but
Yes,
now Michael Palin, isn't it, is the other man
Michael
who did the
Palin
great,
is the
I was
world
struggling with his name
traveler.
there,
Yes,
did a great so I've got a lot of my travel information from those wonderful programs that were put together by him and Billy Connolly and others. And then the other thing is having your connections for many, many years and keeping them alive, because all these years later, in between the things that we've just spoken about, I now find myself selling aircraft parts
As
to
you
the
do. I
aviation
mean,
industry.
it's just a natural fit, isn't it, Don?
Well, this is the point I'm making. It's a fit in a way because I had my long sojourn in aviation with the company, which was terrific. The person who involved me then is now doing other things, and he asked me would I consider getting involved with aircraft, the aviation industry in Ireland and aircraft parts. And I said, well, I don't know a lot about aircraft parts, to be honest. And
Right.
he said, well, to be honest, it's so regulated and so much number orientated, and it's it's such a wide industry. It's not about that. It's about making introductions to companies, and it's about the people in that the company that I'm working for, which is Mitchell Aircraft in Chicago in the United States, don't have on the ground. So I'm very happily doing that with them as well in between, and that's emails and phone calls and a few visits along the way. But generally, the sales aspect of it and putting together the actual order are done by the good people in Mitchell Aircraft in Chicago.
Yeah, and so the great news there is A, we're talking about networking in the context you built up, which has facilitated you to be able to get into this sort of business. B, you're not into the selling part, it's more to do with introductions and your network. And see, it's ticking all the boxes in terms of, plus you've got your tour guide working on as well. It
Yeah.
sounds like the dream job.
Well, do you know what? I'm really enjoying all the aspects of the work I do now, and I do say to people in my coaching side of things, if, and you've mentioned it already, if you can find things that you really love to do, and of course it falls into I'm in my 60s now, so it falls into the latter end of your career. Well, it elongates everything because you enjoy it.
Yes,
I really don't see myself retiring anytime too soon because I'm enjoying it,
yes.
and it's keeping me well and fit. And I'm starting another tour tomorrow, as it happens. So it comes up, and off we jolly well, as another famous DJ used to say. Who was it? Jimmy Young on
Oh,
Radio 2. Off we'll jolly well.
off you jolly well. Well, off you jolly well will go, because I've 30 seconds for you to say where people can find out more about you. That's the end of the show, believe it or not.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how it speeds past when you're having an engaged conversation. Thank you, Alec. It's been an absolute joy. Look, you get me on LinkedIn, Don Harris, Dublin will always get me, and talkback.ie is where I am nowadays. But I've really enjoyed being here, and thank you so much, Alec.
No, and a pleasure to have you back. I mean, as I said, we could be talking forever on this thing. Anyway, we can't. So I have to say goodbye. Thanks to Don Harris for coming into the You and Your Business studio. Thanks also to Stephen on sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 1:00, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.